Could Danny Mendick make the Mets opening day roster as the last piece of their bench? Is Jeff Brigham the pitcher in the Mets bullpen with the best slider not named Edwin Diaz? We're going to discuss all of those things on today's show as we break down the underrated moves of the Mets offseason.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment matter more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Now, this is an episode I've had in the works for about a week now. I was going to start it last week. Some news got in the way, but we are finally getting to it. The underrated moves the Mets made this offseason that could pay the most dividends. And I have to start with Danny Mendick. This was a signing that went under the radar. We were really kind of taken aback by it. Why they sign a guy to a deal for $1 million where he can be on the MLB roster? What are they doing? They have so many other guys they can bring in here. What is sort of the motivation? Well, on the surface, I'll tell you the simplest idea behind this signing. This is a guy that had some success last season that can play third base, shortstop, second base, probably first in a pinch, and all three spots in the outfield. He has logged innings at each of those positions over the last 2 years. So that is the initial side of it, right? Versatility. Also, you essentially get this guy because you are the team that gives him the most money. He's also a New York native, so maybe there's something to that. But particularly when you have a guy that is coming off a torn ACL, to guarantee him $1 million, big deal for a guy like Danny Mendick. And there is flexibility here. He has options. So if he doesn't break camp with the team, you park him in AAA. We have spoken a little bit about Mendick over the last couple of days, or I guess the last week here. And I did mention an interview that Matthew Brownstein did at MetsMirageOnline.com. Look up Mendick's name, Mets Mirage, you'll find it. Great work they do over there, and Matthew does a great job interviewing a bunch of people. He gets great interviews for the site. Part of that interview I found interesting is the fact that it seems like, according to Mendick, he's tracking to be able to be available for opening day. This is still a guy that is trying to establish his big league career, but he was about to break out last season. At least that's what the numbers would indicate. He had 289, 343 on base, 443 slugging. He was playing shortstop primarily for the White Sox. He had a 125 WRC plus. Now that measures hitters based on a league average of 100. So I think even myself, at times I get a little bit too swept up in a statistic like WRC plus because it boils hitters down, and you see someone with a 125 WRC plus over 106 plate appearances, you get excited and you think, well, could he be more? Well, the more I looked at the numbers on Danny Mendick, I saw some things I liked, I saw some things I didn't like. The batted ball data when it comes to, although he did barrel more baseballs this year, if you look at the average exit velocity and the expected batting average, the expected slugging, he's not necessarily making enough quality contact where I can look at 106 plate appearance sample size and say, yes, that is him. But there's also such a small sample size that there is a possibility that maybe he finds some common ground. It could be a really nice bench piece for you. And if he does what he did last year against lefties, he could fit this roster very well. He was 6 for 25. That's a 360 average. Now, you look at his career, he actually has slight reverse splits at the big league level, but I wanted to look at a large sample size. So I found his last full season. Okay, and that is, like one stop, basically a full year. It was over 130 games played in AAA, 133, 2019. hit 279, 368, 444 on base, 17 homers, 26 doubles. That year, he did show an ability to hit left-handed pitching. It was 281 on the average, 349 on the on-base. So those numbers overall a little bit less as far as the OBP compared to the 368 number he put up. So he was better getting on base against righties, but against lefties, he slugged at a 492 clip. So there is some power there against left-handed pitching, and if he can translate that and you're just looking for a super utility guy off the bench, he makes a lot of sense for this team. Now, that season, 2019, he got promoted to the big league level, played 16 games down the stretch, 308 average, 787 OPS. Nice start. 2020 rolls around. 33 games played in the COVID-shortened season, 664 OPS. 2021, that OPS dipped down to 589 in 71 games. And you weren't sure if he was going to have a successful big league career. Then he had the start of a breakout in 2022, playing great baseball, has an unfortunate injury. According to him in that interview I alluded to, it's really the first injury of his career where he collided with the guy and tore his ACL. But his rehab has gone great, seems ready to go, has the versatility, has the athleticism. He's a nice piece. Now, because the Mets have Louis Guillorme, their skill sets overlap a little bit here where I don't know if he can break the roster, but he's not necessarily competing with Guillorme in my opinion, although he does give you that depth when it comes to the backup shortstop position. More importantly, though, he's competing with Darren Ruff, he's competing with Mark Vientos, Brett Beatty, all of these guys to make that last spot. So if Darren Ruff shows up and he still has the yips and can't hit, and the Mets want to take their prospects in Beatty and Vientos, as well as Francisco Alvarez, who we'll touch on a little bit at the end of the show today, and they want to park all them in AAA. Well, now you're looking at him competing with Tim LaCastro, Jose Peraza. I think there is still a pretty decent shot that we see him. If not on the opening roster, we're going to see him this season because injuries pop up and he is high-end depth. So if Guillorme becomes your starting second baseman because, Starling Marte's out and Mark Canha has to shift over to right and McNeil's at left, or it's the other way around, and now Guillorme is playing second base, well, you can now platoon him. So suddenly, you could platoon Mendick and Guillorme. It's a really great addition when you look at the cost of payroll for this team. For Steve Cohen, it's nothing, but most teams can't do that. So that is the value that Steve Cohen brings that we don't talk about nearly enough, as much as you think about Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer each making $43+ million this season. And that's obviously sort of the big ticket area where Cohen's money can trump all. He even can in these lower level biddings, and they can work out for you. They did the same thing last year with Nick Plummer. Didn't end up working out. They tried to buy a prospect. He didn't have a ton of success. He did find another home elsewhere. They did that a couple years ago with the pitcher whose name is escaping me, Sam McWilliams, if I'm not mistaken. And that one didn't work out. So who knows? Maybe Mendick amounts to nothing, but what he did this season, he's got an exciting profile. If he can hit left-handed pitching, fill in all over the place, you might be shocked to find Mendick get 250 plate appearances this year and play a key role for this Mets team. Remember, Travis Jankowski did have a role on the 2022 Mets, and these are the type of guys that you don't really think about that end up panning out pretty big. So if I look at all of the Mets' underrated moves from this offseason, especially when it comes to this variety of kind of waiver pickups, small trades, small signings, I think this is probably the most impactful one. And if not him, it's a reliever we're going to talk about next, Jeff Brigham. I'm going to get to him, some other arms that could make an impact. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. I know my goal is to eat a little bit healthier this year. If you're like me and you want to eat healthier as well, but don't want to compromise taste, I've got to tell you about Built Bars, what makes them so good. For starters, they're covered 100% real chocolate, so imagine eating a candy bar but not having to feel bad about it. That's what it's like to enjoy any of their unbelievable flavors, whether it's the churro, the peanut butter brownie, the coconut almond. These bars all have amazing macros, and what's even better is they're healthy, only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait around for a box, because in the past, for years, I've been telling you, go to Built.com to buy your Built Bars. And you still could go there, and you could still get everything you want shipped to your door. But if you don't want to wait, go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club. You can head in there today at Walmart, go to the pharmacy section, ask them for a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate with the coconut puffs. You can find those. Or go to the Sam's Club, where you can get a 13-bar box with their hit flavors, the brownie batter or the churro. You can thank me later. Go to your local store and buy Built Bar today. Now, I mentioned Jeff Brigham's name for a reason. This is a relief edition I love. Didn't necessarily love the idea of trading Jake Mangum to get him, but still, they were able to acquire a depth arm in Elizar Hernandez, who I really don't like, had a bad season, but a depth starter on the 40. You can't be too mad at that. And Brigham is a reliever that shows a lot of promise. A 2-pitch pitcher. Last year, you look at the fastball run value, and again, run value is a stat that essentially boils down the effectiveness of a pitch and how it related to the runs on the scoreboard. You know, you throw a fastball, you get a big strikeout with 2 runners in scoring position. That's assigned a certain run value that's negated. So a negative run value is good. The run value on his fastball was -2. The run value on his slider was -4. That fastball comes in at 94.5. The slider at 82.2 miles per hour, but he throws it a ton. He almost throws it 60% of the time at 57.5%. It's a sweeping slider, so you have someone like Edwin Diaz that has a real tight break to his slider. You look at Brigham, it is, a slider that really dives, a lot of vertical movement on the pitch, also plenty of horizontal movement as well, and it's tough to square up. Batters last year only slugged .386 against his slider, and the expecting slugging percentage was .349. The whiff percentage on the pitch was 29.5%, which might not look as nasty as, of course, Edwin Diaz, but even, a typical slider that, you say is really good at, 37%. But when you throw the slider as much as Brigham did, that is a great whiff percentage. The whiff percentage on its fastball is 26.7%. This is a pitcher that could really make an impact. Jacob Resnick of SNY tweeted out the top pitches from the 2023 Mets ranked by Eno Saris from The Athletic. And this is his stuff plus metric. This was a minimum of 200 pitches thrown. 100 is the average. Of the relievers in the Mets pen this season, this stuff plus stat had Edwin Diaz's slider number 1 at 152.4, then Jeff Brigham's slider at 151.5, before you got to David Robertson knuckle curve, 141.6, Brooks Raley at 138.9, Drew Smith at 123.1. Now, I'm not Eno Saris. I couldn't tell you how he comes up with what stuff plus is, but I do know he is a smart baseball mind that has this stat for a reason. And when you look at David Robertson's knuckle curve, when you look at Brooks Raley's slider, the fact that Jeff Brigham's slider is valued more is extremely impressive. So I think he has a great shot to make the team, but there's a lot of arms he's competing with. You have Zach Green as one of them, the Rule 5 pickup. 3.42 ERA over nearly 70 innings in AAA last year. His strikeout per 9 was 12.6. For his career, it was 13 flat. That's in the minor leagues, of course. The Mets picked him up in the Rule 5. They had to keep him on the roster to retain his rights. We'll see if he gets that far. A lot of times a Rule 5 draft pick could end up DFA'd, before we even get to opening day, but the Mets valued him enough to take him, to give him a roster spot. We'll see if he can stick. Also from the Yankees, you have Steven Ridings, big 6'8" righty that when the Mets were able to grab him, Yankees fans didn't like it. There is some value there. He has good numbers at the major league level, but not a lot of innings. I don't think he's even at 10 innings pitched at the big league level. And he also has struggled to get on the mound in the minors. So we'll see if he can be healthy and he can maybe bring that big fastball from that huge frame. He has a chance to break through this team. I already mentioned Elizar Hernandez, another kind of underrated addition. You still have John Curtis from last year, but that doesn't necessarily pertain to this show as far as underrated additions from this offseason. But those are some of the arms in the mix. You also have Bryce Montes de Oca, Steven Nogasek. There's some others. Of course, there's some minor league signings. They're able to get William Woods back into the mix as far as in spring training, it appears. So that is good to see. Tommy Hunter, a guy that we've seen a bunch the last couple of years. He's kind of becoming almost like a Rene Rivera, where guys that the organization likes to keep popping up. Tommy Hunter sticks around. I imagine you see Hunter at some point this season. And on the position player side, Tim LaCastro, Jose Peraza, both of those guys give you infield depth. LaCastro, a great base stealer. Peraza, a great glove, who also was recently with the Mets. So those are some other underrated additions that you could see at some point as they built out their depth in Syracuse. And the last name I wanted to mention is Michael Perez, another good defensive catcher. We saw him with the Mets last year. Swings it from the left side. You're not going to expect much offensively, but gives you another defensive first option behind the dish. You can never have too many of those. That is really all when it comes to the underrated additions that are in that vein, right? Pickups, on low money deals, waivers, small trades, the stuff that we really don't talk about much. But there's still another player that I think has gone a little bit under the radar, and it's a major league signing. It was a pretty good amount of money, and that's Omar Narvaez. I want to discuss his underrated value next because I think it really is tied to the top prospect in this system when it comes to the Mets, and that is, of course, Francisco Alvarez. So we'll get to that in a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This is the time of year where all of us are focused on the Super Bowl, and this is the only app you need at your Super Bowl party because FanDuel is the #1 sportsbook in America. We are thrilled they've become our new sports betting partner here at Locked On. If you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to the point spread to who will score a touchdown. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, the last underrated offseason edition I wanted to discuss today is Omar Narvaez. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up Narvaez now as an underrated addition, it's not necessarily what he brings to the field, although that is obviously part of why the Mets signed him. You want him to be that left-handed platoon to start the season with Tomas Nido. You want to give Francisco Alvarez time to develop. But that's actually why this move is underrated. One of the things that Narvaez discussed when he met with the media is that he'd be willing to mentor Francisco Alvarez, the young phenom. Well, the more you dig into this, the more it actually makes sense from a player personnel level as far as the makings of a clubhouse and the value that the Mets are placing in Alvarez. You say, well, signing a guy that's going to start over him, how is that placing value in Alvarez? Well, it's because this is the perfect mentor for a young catcher, particularly one born in Venezuela. Where's Omar Narvaez from? Venezuela. So they have that in common, and that is a great, starting point for their mentor-mentee relationship. And what can Narvaez teach Francisco Alvarez? Well, for one, he signed all the way back in 2009, came stateside in 2011 at 19 years old. So now he has been in the United States playing professional baseball for over a decade. He debuted in 2016, so he has 7 years now of MLB experience, 600 games, a great defensive catcher who knows how to work with a big league staff. And already, we saw today, Omar Narvaez doing what? Playing catch with Francisco Alvarez. That relationship is already starting to form, and that was probably a big reason why he was brought into the fold in the first place, to have a guy that is there to carry him through spring training, and at some point this season, Francisco Alvarez will be up at the big club. And what that's going to look like, we still don't know, because you wonder, how are the Mets going to go with this? Are they going to go with 3 catchers? What exactly are they going to do? Well, either an injury is going to pop up to either Narvaez or Nido that's going to necessitate a move, and he's going to be playing good enough that they're going to want to call him, or it could be an injury to someone else on the roster. Daniel Vogelback pulls a hamstring. Alvarez is on fire. They bring him up. Darren Ruff started the season on the roster, playing terrible. DFA him. Bring Alvarez up. I think there's a good chance that we see 3 catchers on the big league roster at a time at some point this year, and Alvarez will get a healthy amount of time at the DH spot. He'll get to catch, and Narvaez will be that key mentor to bring him along. So, yes, it's underrated, or it's maybe properly rated when we look at the impact he might have on the field. When you think about all those other elements to this, it becomes one of the more underrated moves that Billy Epler made this offseason. You send out a James McCann, who might not have been the ideal mentor for Francisco Alvarez, and you get a guy who comes from the same home country who can take him and put him under his wing and hopefully turn him into, or help turn him into, a big league catcher that will inevitably take his job. And Yeah, that's just part of the beast of Major League Baseball. But regardless, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. Tomorrow's show, something I'm pretty excited about. Who's better, the New York Mets or the Philadelphia Phillies? Make sure you tune into that. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. And for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects, hosted by Lindsey Crosby. Locked On MLB Prospects is where you want to go to learn about the stars of tomorrow. Follow Locked On MLB Prospects on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get podcasts.